moving ahead with today's agenda, once again a familiar picture that is of the web application architecture. We were trying to explore part by part how applications managers monitoring capabilities fit in to different aspects of a particular web application architecture, and we have already covered websites, web servers, and I believe even reverse proxy. So today what we are going to do is we are trying to visualize from the code level how different applications interact and how to analyze the different transactions that happen when a user accesses your application. So when any user accesses your application, there are multiple transactions that take place, right? And it only is fitting if you have that transaction information so that you can analyze and eliminate faults before you even deploy your application. So that is going to be the primary focus of today's agenda, and we will be seeing how you can receive absolute insight into the way your applications behave or the way your applications respond to different interactions. We will identify the specific components of the application that are responsible for potential performance issues, and even drill down to the SQL query level. That is, every time we talk about the code level insight, it's basically to drill down to the particular query or the particular script that is actually causing a performance problem that could be slowing down the application or irresponsive server. So we will drill down to the query level and identify those problems. And eventually we will also see to monitor the performance of your JVM for all your Java-based apps, and additionally the Java runtime monitor as well. So beginning with the first topic of the agenda, that is analyzing and measuring the performance of your web applications. Now, ideally, this is done for all applications that are based on Java, .NET, as well as Ruby on Rails. Now, the key module that we will be discussing in order to cover today's agenda is APM Insight. Now, APM Insight is an add-on to Applications Manager, and just what is the value that APM Insight brings is what we are going to see in real time through the course of this webinar. Now, a brief overview about APM Insight, that is, when we talk about servers and problems that occur in the server side, it is only fitting that we identify and monitor those problems in the server side itself. So it is always beneficial to address problems before your end users even identify it or even experience it. As was evident from a recent survey that we had conducted, apparently 32% of IT admins understand issues about their applications from end users, which probably isn't ideal. The organization should be able to identify and fix issues before end users realize it, and which is precisely what APM Insight enables us to do. Then again, deep diving into the performance metrics, that is from the URL to the SQL query level, as I have already mentioned, and then analyzing the traces of various transactions, the error traces, so we can understand in particular the problems that are occurring and the probable fix for those problems. So we will go through a few slides about APM Insight and then take a look at the module inside the product. Now, once an agent is configured, as I said, the APM Insight module supports .NET applications, Java applications, and applications running on Ruby on Rails, provided an agent is installed in your machine, which will again interact with your application and populate data within the product. So when you install the agent, let us assume you install the .NET agent, and when data starts populating, this screen right here is the overview tab, and this must give you a rough idea about the kind of information that you can expect from the APM Insight module. Now, of course, we will be seeing similar representations within the product, but let us take a look at a few more slides before we do that. Now, APM Insight also enables the AppDex scores. Most of you might be familiar with the AppDex score. The AppDex score, in fact, is an open standard that is used to measure the user satisfaction levels when based upon their interactions with the web application. Now, ideally, this AppDex score is set at 0.5, and based upon that 0.5 threshold, the overall AppDex score is presented. Now, of course, these thresholds are customizable, and you can have your own desirable AppDex score based upon your specific thresholds. So, based upon the AppDex score, this particular meter must actually give application owners or application developers a very fair idea about how the customers are actually finding that application. So based upon the thresholds you set, the thresholds that are necessary in order to deliver a desirable experience, and you can always make sure that you can maintain an ideal AppDex score anywhere between 0 to 1. And we will first be taking a look at the .NET agent, how to install and monitor a .NET app using the .NET agent. So let me show you a few slides about the agent configuration, that is the .NET agent configuration. And then we will go to the product and configure it by ourselves and populate data. So ideally what happens is once you download the .NET agent and you install it, first we will have to configure the agent through this configuration window, wherein we will have to specify certain criteria like the AppDex threshold that we were just discussing about. So things like the AppDex threshold, the sampling factor, the transaction tracing threshold, these are some of the customizable fields which we'll have to configure before the agent is actually set up for monitoring. Again, this is the configuration window for the .NET agent, as we will be seeing in a few moments. So once the agent is configured, that is, the different tabs are configured. As you can see, the 6 different tabs listed out in this slide. Once you configure the agent should be ready to collect metrics. And these metrics, some of which can be seen in this screen right now. So basically, the recent slow transactions, the top 5 transactions by response time. Now, these are just a few examples. You can apply different filters and analyze transaction based upon by sorting them as per different filters. That is slow transactions, 5 transaction, or maybe analyze your DBs, calls per minute, or requests per minute, metrics like that. So a quick look at the web transaction window. That is, the last descriptive diagram that we had seen was about the overview tab. Now this one is about the web transaction. Now what the web transaction tab basically presents is every single transaction. As if you follow my cursor, you should be able to see that all the different transactions are here listed out. And these are sorted in terms of the slowest average response time. And once you click on any particular web transaction on your left, the corresponding details of that particular transaction should be reflected on the right in the form of a numerical as well as a graphical representation. Scrolling down, you should be able to see more details about that particular web transaction, which includes but is not limited to the transaction AppDex score, the response time, as well as the throughput. Of course, going and exploring these things in the product should give us a fair idea about how this actually works. So now let me switch to the UI and show you how the .NET agent configuration works and just how we can visualize those data within the product. So right here is where I'm inside the product, and firstly, the download APM Insight for Applications Manager. Now, a simple Google search with the keywords APM Insight for .NET should lead you to the link to this page. And once you are here in this page, you can download the Java agent or the .NET agent or the Ruby on Rails agent. So once you have downloaded, you should be good to go. So what we are going to see now is once you download the .NET agent, what happens is, remember, and this is particularly important, that when you are configuring the .NET agent, you are supposed to restart your IIS server before the agent is configured. Now this restarting the IIS server is important, and we would particularly recommend you to schedule a downtime for this IIS server so that your application data is not reset. And during the course of the agent configuration, so right here is the .NET agent configuration window. Let me bring it to your screen. And remember, once the agent is installed, the agent will automatically prompt you to restart the IIS server. So ideally, during the installation itself, you can restart the IIS server. However, if you are accessing the configuration window separately, remember, restart your IIS server and then go ahead and configure the .NET agent. So let us speak about these tabs here, just what they are intended for, and then we will go to the product, and hopefully we should be able to visualize .NET agent collecting and representing data within the product. So the general tab is basically where you enter all your basic details about the port number, the host name, and even the application name, how you want it to be represented within the product. The AppDex threshold is right here. That is set at 0.5 by default. Of course, these are customizable fields. And then you can actually capture the SQL data queries as well as the transaction traces if you enable these checkboxes here, including the CPU time. You can enable or disable logging using the option right here, as well as assign a severity level to your logs from the drop-down box right here. So let us take a look at the advanced tab, wherein you specify the sampling factor again. By default, it's 5. Now, what is the sampling factor exactly? The sampling factor means for every 5 transactions, 1 transaction sample will be pushed to the product and the data will be populated for that. So that is a sampling factor for you. And then right here, if you enable this option, you can choose to hide any specific sensitive information that you might have so that it is not exposed. And if your organization utilizes a firewall or a proxy network, you can specify those details right here. And of course, we release the agents upgrades time and again. So in case you want to automatically upgrade your agents, you can choose the auto update option. So let us take a look at the app filters tab now. Now, essentially, what does the app filters tab represent? Is it represents all the different apps that are hosted in your server. That is, in this case, our IIS server. So right now, there's one app, and I think this is pretty much enough for our example today. Okay, the next tab, let us take a look at the background transaction tab. Again, whether or not you want to analyze the background transactions as well. Now, of course, several transactions take place in the front end, but most of these transactions might have an underlying transaction in the back end as well, which your developers working in the production phase might actually find really useful. So you can actually avail the option of enabling background transactions. And trace settings will allow you to capture traces within the APM Insight UI, and as you can see here, you can customize or edit the threshold. As you can see right here, this says that the stack trace threshold for SQL transaction trace is kept at 3, which means when the threshold is violated, only then the stack trace for SQL transaction will be represented within the UI. And then finally, the last tab, that is transaction merge. Now, this is a really useful tab. Now, let us take an example, say for example, the app that you have hosted on your IIS server, as we'll be seeing in the example, let's say an e-commerce app. So what you can essentially do is, for example, say Amazon.com, and say a user, any user. So this is what I'm trying to do here is create a URL pattern the way it will be represented. So any user, this could be a dynamic value, right? So let me replace the term user with a star and then replace it with the term user. So what this basically means is a URL with the pattern of Amazon slash a dynamic value will be replaced as user. So what you can do is imagine your e-commerce website where a lot of users come in. So instead of monitoring all of them separately, you can perhaps match similar patterns together so it becomes easier for you to track and monitor and find data. So once this is configured, clicking on save should actually make our agent active. So let me just show you once quickly in the task manager, that is within services. Once the agent is installed, you will find it running within services. So you can see right here the .NET agent is here. So let me minimize this, and what I am going to do now is open the IIS server. This is the IIS server, the host server where my app is hosted. So in order to visualize data, we will have to perform a few transactions, right? So let me open this app, browse it, and right here. So again, this is just a sample application that I'm using that is hosted on the IIS server. For example, that is for the purpose of today's webinar. Now this could be any app that you have hosted on your IIS server, and you can collect metrics. So in this app, let me just click through a few links. So basically these are some transactions that I am performing. So now remember this transactions, now imagine my transactions as your end users transactions. So any end user who is probably browsing this app of yours, which is hosted on the IIS server, you can measure the performance that person is having across different parts of the world, that is. So we have clicked on a few links, that is a few transactions. Let us close this and try seeing within the product if there is data. So I know performing transactions right now, there will actually be a small time duration where the agent collects data and populates it. So this is the app that we had created, and the data that we are seeing here is the data I have populated few hours earlier. However, the transactions that we just performed should also be visible right here. So this is the overview tab. Again, as we had seen in the presentation, the overview tab giving us the AppDex score, which seems to be quite ideal, the average response time and throughputs, and error percentage of 0. Now, when we come down, you can see the graphical representation exactly the way that we had seen in the presentation. Now, this is the overview tab that we are talking about. Let us take a look at the web transaction tab. Now, within the web transaction tab, if you see on the left, if I click on this particular transaction, on my right is the corresponding detail about that particular transaction. So once I see that on my right is the component split up based upon the percentage. Scrolling down gives me the transaction update score. Now remember, these are information for one particular transaction. Now you can visualize the same information, detailed information for every single transaction that is reflected on your left. Of course, you can sort it based upon the throughput, the most time consuming, and as well as based upon errors. So this was about the .NET application configuration and then trying to visualize data with the help of the .NET app. Let me go back to the presentation just one more time. And let me show you the next topic that we will be seeing. That is, how do we identify which particular SQL query is slowing down a web application? Now, before this, let us take a look at how our database is performing. So a couple of slides where we discuss about these things, and then we will again go back to the product. So as you can see from this screen, you can actually visualize the database transactions. That is, right here you can see the database tab and the different transactions on the left. Now, just as we saw for the web transactions, clicking on every single transaction here will yield data, the corresponding data on the right. And you can, this actually helps the developers significantly because it tells us about all the database transactions, that is the request per minute or the calls per minute that is happening during interaction with the database and the application. So visualizing these as well as drilling down through the SQL query level should help us identify where the problem is, what the problem is, and to find a possible quick fix to that problem. So let me go to the product once again. Here we are, and this one is the database tab. Now, as we saw the different transactions on the left, let me click on one particular transaction, and on the right is the corresponding data for that particular database transaction. Scrolling down should show us more information pertaining to that particular database. Now, this is about the database. Now, again, on our right, you can actually choose the time for which you want to visualize this data. That is, you can choose any date or time for which you can visualize the data. For example, this is yesterday's time that I have selected, and you can see the amount of data represented. Now, this is particularly the reason why I took yesterday's data, because if you see here, this can give you a better idea about how data will be represented, because since a lot of transactions could take place with your application ideally on any given day, and it is only reasonable that we visualize it only in terms of how it is going to be when you actually implement it and see it in your organization. So here you can see the split up of every single activity, that is the database operation, and then the same in terms of response time. So we had also spoken about background. So this is what the background tab looks like. Let me go to the presentation and show you just how the background transactions look like. So this is precisely how the background transactions look like. Now remember, I had told you that several transactions take place in the front end, but it is only necessary and obvious that your developers or your technicians working in the production phase are always aware of the background transactions, because that is where some errors might actually go unnoticed. So in order to prevent those, this information presented by the APM Insight module could actually be of significant use. And as I said again, the errors can be found right here from the errors tab, that is every single error. And then we did speak about the SQL query level details, right? So we will actually go and see the query level details in a few moments. So let me just click on a particular error, say this one. And all right, so now we are inside the error tab as we were discussing. And inside the error tab, you can see the details listed quite clearly. Now this summary tab presents the summary of the errors, that is the slowest components, and not just listing the components, but the number of those components as well as the duration that they have taken, resulting in why they have been so slow. Clicking on the trace details will give us the exact trace of that error. And then again, if there are any SQL statements, you can find the SQL statements as well. Right here is the stack trace of your errors. So this is about the error tab. Right here again, I click on the traces tab. Clicking on a particular error trace again takes me to that particular trace and trace details about the error. So as you can see, a lot of insight for your technicians or developers working during the production phase to identify, pinpoint the problems accurately and fix those problems even before your app is out there for your users to access, or even before your users have an inkling about a possible performance threat. So this was about the .NET agent that we configured and we saw the data for. Now let us take a look at the Java agent. So once again, same place where you download the Java agent. Now remember, this is important. The supported versions of Java should be 1.5 and above for APM Insight Java agent to collect data. Similarly, for .NET, you can find the prerequisites right here. Of course, you can always refer to our help document wherein a lot of information will be present that can assist you, or of course you can reach us out to in our support email ID, and our technicians will always be available to assist you with a personalized demo of based upon your custom requirements, or help you with any other product related queries you might have. So taking a look at the Java agent now. So once you download the Java agent here, now let me show you where I have downloaded it. So right here, this is my APM Insight Java agent. Now what happens is, once you download the APM Insight Java agent, you open this apminsight.conf file. And remember, for the .NET agent, we had an agent configuration window, right, where we had entered the host name, the port number, as well as a display name. Now those details for the Java agent, you enter them right here. Now if you see here, application name Tomcat. So what I am doing today is I have used the Tomcat server as a Java-based app for which we will be monitoring the details and visualizing them with the agent inside the product. Here is my host name. Here is my port number. So once you enter these details here, the details should be saved and you should be able to visualize data within the product. So once this is done, the next thing is, remember, now this is important, you will have to locate the path of this Java agent. So once you have located the path of this Java agent, what you have to do ideally is, now I open the Tomcat configuration window. Now once I open the Tomcat configuration window, let me drag it here for you. So this is the Tomcat configuration window. Now remember, let me open the help document for you, which should make it easier to understand. So what we are going to do essentially here is follow the instructions given for configuring the Java agent in an Apache Tomcat server. Now remember, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Java tab here, and what I have done is I have already entered the APM Insights path here. That is, remember, locate your Java agent's path and enter that path in the JVM or Java argument space of your particular Java application. Now here, since I'm using the Tomcat application, I have entered the path here. Now similarly, if you see here, you can find the details for other Java-based applications, including the IBM WebSphere, JBoss, Oracle WebLogic, and so on. So locate the configuration window and then enter the path of your agent in the Java argument, and we should be good to go. Now, once this is done, remember, go to services and then restart your Tomcat server. Only when you restart the Tomcat server, the agent should start working without any problem, and the data should be reflected inside the product seamlessly. And also remember, in case you have an in-house application, any Java application that you have built in-house and you want to monitor those, remember to enter this path in the file that is invoked during startup. So when you start your particular in-house Java application, the file that is invoked during startup, you have to enter the Java path in that file. Now, similarly, if you're using a Linux environment, the script that is invoked during startup of that application, you will have to enter the Java agent path in that script. So once that is done, the agent should be ready to collect information. So once I click OK, and then the next step that I should be doing is open my Tomcat server. So right here is my Tomcat server running. So what I'm going to do now is, again, for the .NET agent, we had seen an e-commerce application for as an example, right? So we are going to take another application as an example here, which I have already added. So yeah, so this is the application, the Java-based application that we will be using as an example. So before we do this, let me enter the application and hold it right here. So let us go and take a look at the presentation and see the topics that we will be seeing when we monitor the JVM performance or any Java application with the help of the Java agent. So the details that will be collected will include the JVM metrics primarily, which will list the memory details, including the heap, non-heap, and runtime memory, and then the garbage collection metrics as well. So you can actually visualize all garbage collectors and the collection count, as well as the time spent for those garbage collection activity. And most importantly, you can actually see the threads, the thread counts, the thread status, whether the threads are running, they are blocked, they are waiting, they're queued. So all of these thread details, every individual thread details can be visualized with the help of the Java agent. So going back to where we had left, so right here I'm in the app. So let me perform a few transactions, right? Only then we should be able to see data. So let me click here and there. And all right, so we have performed a few transactions. However, let us try to see a few errors. So I remove this and I click enter. So obviously this is an invalid URL, right? So I should be seeing an error as is shown here. Now, of course, scrolling down, the entire stack trace for the error is here, which again will be represented within the product. So we have performed a few transactions. Let us go back to the product and see if it is reflected. So right here, the Tomcat app. So this is the APM Insight module, the representation of the Java application, that is Tomcat in this case. So the summary tab once again gives us all the information about the particular application's JVM, CPU usage, the memory details. So remember, all of these tabs are similar for the .NET and Java agents, except the JVM tab. Now, of course, when we are dealing with the Java applications, the JVM becomes one of the most important monitorable points, which we obviously do not want to miss. So when we arrive at the JVM tab and click on the garbage collector, right here on my right is the garbage collection activity for mark sweep as well as for scavenge. And as I had said about threads, of course, you can filter these out based upon the values that you would want to see. But then again, let us click on threads and see the threads represented in the form of these graphical images. Of course, there are no deadlock threads present for this one, so there's nothing to worry about that here. And the configuration detail is basically the overall detail about your application instance. So here are the errors as we had just spoken about, and these are the errors. If you click on a particular error, then again we have come back to the screen that we had seen during the .NET agent configuration, that is the trace details, the SQL statements. Now this is what we meant when we said drilling down to the SQL query level. Now imagine any developer using it. Now this is precisely the information that he would be relying on in order to identify and fix issues in the production phase. Now, these information could be of real value as we time and again hear from our customers about the importance of transaction level details or code level details to identify and rectify performance issues. So, of course, this was about the Java agent. Now, we have seen the .NET agent, we have seen the Java agent. So, what do we see next is, of course, with the Java agent, we can collect these metrics, the JVM metrics in particular. But beyond this, Applications Manager actually has an additional monitor known as the Java Runtime Monitor. Now, this Java Runtime Monitor is exclusively designed to monitor more details about your JVM statistics, garbage collection, thread dumps, thread pools, and so on. Now, how does this help you? Now, we spoke about developing in-house applications, right? Now, imagine you have an in-house application that is based on the Java framework, and you want to monitor the critical metrics of this monitor. Now, however, you think that a monitoring tool might not actually recognize your in-house monitor and will not be able to give you the necessary insights. Now, the simplest way to proceed and collect data here would be to employ the Java Runtime Monitor. Now, this Java Runtime Monitor will collect metric of any Java-based application, including your in-house applications, and present data in detail about garbage collection, about key metrics, about your threads, and of course, like any other monitor, it will also allow you to associate thresholds, configure alarms and actions in order to comprehensively monitor all your Java applications. Now, let me go to the product quickly after we have gone through a few more slides. So again, as we spoke about thread dumps and heap dumps, now remember, usually what happens is with most monitoring tools, that is, you will have to go back to your installation path and then try to analyze the thread dumps from there. However, what Applications Manager does is it allows you to instantly generate thread dumps right from the product UI, or in fact, it allows you to automatically create actions for Java-based applications. So when a particular threshold is breached and you think that every time this threshold is breached, the most logical step would be to analyze thread dumps, Applications Manager will allow you to automate that as an action. That is, a particular threshold is violated and you should automatically receive the thread dumps for analysis instead of having to manually do that. Now, these thread dumps and heap dumps can be triggered, of course, based upon different criteria that we specify here. Now, of course, if the action is associated with a host, this will trigger the thread dump for the JREs available in the host. And similarly, if the action is associated with, say, a Tomcat or a JRE monitor, this will trigger thread dump for all the JREs that are present in that Tomcat server or the JRE. Or similarly, you can do that for a particular monitor group, that is all the JREs that are present in your particular monitor group, the thread dumps can be triggered. And similarly, for a specific Tomcat server or JRE or a specific host, the thread dumps can be configured. So that is all in the presentation. Let us go to the product and let us see for ourselves how this Java Runtime Monitor can be added. So what I have done is the process of adding the Java Runtime Monitor is pretty simple, as we have seen in the previous sessions. But then again, let me click on the Edit Monitor tab here and show you the fields that we will be prompted to fill when we add the Java Runtime Monitor. So a simple display name, the port number would suffice, and you see that these credentials are absolutely perfect for this Java Runtime Monitor, and this should actually add a monitor. So once the monitor is added, like any other monitor, you can see the summary of the monitor through the Overview tab, wherein the name, health, the processor count, and the overview is present here. Of course, right here is the option to view the thread dump, but then again, let us take a look at the other tabs before we actually see the thread dumps. So the connection time, the memory usage, and other primary information about your Java-based monitor is present right here. Now, once you scroll down, you can see a plethora of metrics represented here, but then let us click on the garbage collection tab and look at the garbage collection activities. Now, right here from the comfort of your UI, you should be able to perform garbage collection. So clicking on it, the perform garbage collection activity has been successfully triggered. Going down, you should be able to see the impact of a garbage collector. Clicking on this, a new window should open up, which should present the impact of the particular garbage collection activity. And similarly, we spoke about threads. Here you can see the total threads started and every single thread, including the particular thread details. Now again, here is the option to view thread dump. Let me click on the view thread dump, and right here is the thread dump with all the information that we might possibly need to locate a particular problematic thread and identify and fix the problem. So here is the state of each thread, and every single thread, its name represented here. So obviously there will be multitudes of threads running. So with the help of the thread dump, of course, most of you might be using thread dumps very frequently, as we hear from our customers' conversations. And apparently most people find an additional overhead in having to go to the root, the path of where the APM has been installed, and then to visualize thread dumps from there. However, with the Applications Manager, one click within the UI should actually give you the entire thread dump for analysis. So the ability to configure actions, that is view thread dump, view heap dump, and perform garbage collection, all from a single UI of the Java Runtime Monitor.